This is me, Dave Roberts, on the wonderful Meridian 107 FM. And the month has gone by that quickly. And my very good friend, Mr. Derek Shelmerdine, is now sitting right opposite me. Good evening, Derek, and welcome back again to Meridian.
Hi, Dave. Great to be back again. The time does fly when you're enjoying yourself.
Are you turned on? Let's try that again.
That's it. We turned on now.
Hang on.
It's great to be back with you.
That's
we're there now. We're all there. That's
normally, you see, you've got the voice of four men. You see, so powerful that normally I'm controlling the old fader here and thinking, wow, the needle's going to go off the scale.
Right.
But tonight you weren't too bad. You're obviously a bit restrained.
Well, it's the summer of love. I'm just feeling so laid back.
Well, you have to, don't you?
As if we're in San Francisco all over again.
I don't know if you heard my little intro when I was talking about you coming in, but I was Summer Love. I was 9. Well, I was coming up to 9 because my birthday's at the end of the year. So I was coming. So I was 8 and a half, something like that. And I do remember I have a very strong. I used to go to my local church, which is basically near enough opposite where I lived, in the summer of 67. Yeah. And every year they did this thing called the Summer Club. And basically it was to keep all the Herberts like me off the streets and give them something to do.
Absolutely.
And for the first 2 weeks of the 6-week break, we'd get this Summer Club. And you'd go over there and you'd play games and you'd go on outings, you'd go swimming, I don't know, you'd go down to the coast for the day, anything like that. And I have a very, very incredibly strong memory of being a passenger in one of the kind of leader's cars. And he had, I can't even remember what it was. It was a white automatic Mini. And I can remember he turned the radio on, and for the first time I heard "All You Need Is Love" by the Beatles.
Right.
And it's a wonder. It's a lovely memory because did it actually come out in 67?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, we chat about that a little bit later.
So it must have been, probably one of the first plays.
The summer. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
It was.
Yeah, but it's a lovely feeling.
Yeah, and I mean that really was one of the anthems of the Summer of Love, but it gets very associated with Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, because that was historically, I mean, hippies didn't arrive in 67. If anything, it was the tail end of the real hippie era. We'll look at that a little bit later, towards the end of the summer, as it were. But on the 21st of June, summer solstice, a bunch of hippies famously met to kick off the Summer of Love, as it were, on a hilltop overlooking Haight-Ashbury. So that's got to be the place to have seen it in. Because I mean, then what was happening by about 67. It was becoming very commercialised. So the record companies were really starting to capitalise on it.
When do you think that either the word hippie or the fashion of the hippie? When did that start? Do you think?
Well, it really grew out of the beatnik era, so that's why there's a strong association between writers and beat writers. People like Ginsberg. I can't remember if he was actually at this particular gathering of music and poetry. He probably was, but there are a number of these events that Ginsberg turns up to. And I think what happened was the hippies really branched off from the more highbrow beatniks. Into the what became the free love, the whole non-commercialization. They were anarchists, I think, without getting too sort of political as to fine cutting straws as to whether they were true anarchists or not. But they certainly believed in free spirit, yeah. Absolutely, free love, living together in communes.
Do you think really they were just idle and couldn't be bothered to get a job?
Well,
I think that was probably most of them, don't you?
There was probably one or two like that, but I think that one or two or three or four, maybe 5, 6.
Yeah.
But what it was, I mean, it just was. It was a different way of looking at the world. They were very much into the whole sort of self-sufficiency thing, and a lot of it would you got the LSD thing around here, tune in, turn on, drop out. It's all the same kind of thing. Again, this is the first-ish era of teenage culture, so you got a serious rebelling against parents, when parents would be very much 9 to 5 jobs.
Short back and sides, mum had a perm.
Absolutely,
kind of
absolutely. I can remember Auntie Connie coming round and doing my mother's hair. This strange smell every now and again when home perms were being carried out. It was one of life's interesting things. And girls tended to wear curlers in their hair. I remember...
went to bed with curlers in.
Went to bed.
Certainly
we went
my
to the
mum did.
dance. Because what used to happen, we used to have a local dance hall that opened, the Ritz, famous Ritz in Shotton. And it used to open Saturday lunchtime. So there was a Saturday lunchtime session, afternoon session. And then there was an evening session. And the lunchtime session, the girls, it would be the same people who went to the evening one. And they were all there with the curlers, the big curlers in and the scarves on their heads. So, you know, the girls you're dancing with have the curlers in, and that was all this sort of era. I mean, I was 19 in the Summer of Love, so, you know, it was right up my street, as it were. I mean, one sad thing for me about Summer of Love was that was the year I left Cleo's Mood, the band that I'd been in for the previous 3 or 4 years.
I see, right.
Because, well, what had happened is I just passed some exams at Tech College, and the possibility of a career opened up. Oh. So I thought...
Do you think your band, had you continued, were you already going down the kind of hippie Summer of Love route, or were you already there, or do you think you'd have just sort of followed the trend, as it were?
We were certainly doing a lot of Who-type stuff, Stone, so R&B covers. It was mostly... And blues stuff. We used to do Little Walter, My Babe. Didn't have a harmonica player, spookily enough, but that didn't seem to stop us having to go at it. But yeah, the band itself became Fairground, did turn pro later on. I loved it. I mean, it was great fun. But I mean, the Summer of Love itself, there seems to be some disputers who the names seem to just sort of emerge, you know, like you see in some of these horror movies where something just sort of crystallizes out of nothing and all of a sudden it's there. But one thing it does get traced back to was a local council for the Summer of Love, that was either local authority or some arts group set up, and that was for ideas for theatrical and artistic events, dances, concerts and happenings in the Haight-Ashbury area. But a guy called Chet Helms, who was one of the big names there in terms of concert organisers, he became known as the father of the Summer of Love. But it was Bill Graham who famously opened the Fillmore's East and West in San Francisco.
The Billy Graham?
Not the evangelical come and join us, tambourine in hand Billy Graham. No, this is another Bill Graham,
right?
Who actually set up he was the most high profile probably promoter of the time with the Fillmores and one or two other ventures. He actually registered the name Summer of Love, sort of hippie ideals meet capitalism there. So, and he did license it back some years later to Chet Helms for $1 when he was looking to do, I think it was 40 years on or something. Yeah. He was doing some concerts, and he allowed him to use the name, which I thought was very generous.
Very good, very good.
But I mean, the music scene was really quite interesting then, because
absolutely.
I mean, the Beach Boys had Pet Sounds, and Brian Wilson was following that up with famously with an album that was due to be called Smile, but it was really quite far out there. And the rest of the band didn't really like it. And he ended up abandoning that in May the 2nd, Summer of Love 67. It did actually see the light of day about 40 years later. But that is famously the lost album of the 60s. Of course, you've got Procol Harum's White a Shade of Pale, one of the real anthems of the era. I mean, that's interesting because it's, again, 40 years on, Matthew Fisher, the guy who plays the famous organ riff in it, he decided that he should really have a writing credit. Now, why it took him that long to quite figure that out, I don't know. But he did go to court, and he initially lost, contested that, won, but the settlement he did get it, and he did get a writing credit, but it was only from that time, which is about 2005, I think. I can't remember the exact
It's still
date.
a good thing to have, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Even from 2005.
Oh, very much so. I mean, that's one of the songs, a bit like Slade. It's Christmas song.
It's a staple on all the retro stations, isn't it? Yeah.
It's I saw the BBC some years ago, not too many years ago, identified that as the most played song in public places. I mean, it is one of the most played songs ever, and will continue to be, I guess, for a long time to come. I mean, Hendrix's first album appeared. Pink Floyd were doing their first, second singles, first albums around this time. But one of the stories I do love was Moby Grape. They had their first album out. Skip Spence set the band up. He'd been the drummer on the Jefferson Airplane's first album. And he was a guitarist, joined the Airplane as the drummer, played on the first album, First Flight, and decided, no, I want to be a guitarist again. So he formed his own band, Moby Grape. And when they released it, the record label released 10 of the tracks on 5 singles and released them all on the same day. So as a record collector, that would have been 2 or 3 weeks pocket money sorted out.
And how well did they sell? Have you any idea?
Oh, I'm not sure how many were actual hits at the time, but they sold. I mean, Moby Grape's one of these bands that was, I wouldn't say they were second division, but they never quite reached the heights of people like Jefferson Airplane, Country Joe, and the Fish. But they were solid West Coast. I mean, they were successful. They did a bunch of albums over the years. But interesting, I mean, David Bowie is slogging away through the 60s, and on June the 1st, 1967, obviously, he released his first album, eponymously titled. So he was still 3-4 years away from commercial success. Because, I mean, Space Oddity sort of popped his head over the parapet, as it were, but it was another year or so before he really hit the big time. And it's interesting how many of these massive 70s artists were really beavering away across the 60s. Rod Stewart was the same. He was in a bunch of different...
They were doing their apprenticeship, I suppose.
Absolutely. Learning their trade.
Yeah.
Mark Bolan. He was another one that was beavering away quite heavily across the 60s. But I thought we shouldn't go too far into this whole thing without getting into the spirit of it. And, there's nothing quite like Scott McKenzie, San Francisco. Be sure to wear flowers in your hair for the mood.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful stuff there. Scott McKenzie, of course, and San Francisco. Be sure to wear flowers in your hair. Did you ever wear flowers in your hair, Derek? I mean, because I can't do it anymore because I'm complete. I've got a head like a billiard ball. But Derek, even though he's 10 years older than me, has still got the most magnificent head of quite, well, I'd say shoulder length hair.
It is. It's about the right length now, I think.
Yeah,
but no, I've never really been into the flowers in the hair scene. But flowers did play a big part of the whole hippie culture. There's a very famous photograph of a Vietnam war demonstration with a line of soldiers, National Guard probably, with their rifles drawn and pointed. And there's a lady standing in front of one of them. It might be Kent actually, and she puts a flower down the stem of the. Of the gun. I mean, flowers were quite symbolic, I think.
I wonder what happened after that. Did he just still stand there, or do you think he dropped the gun so the flower would fall out, or what happened? Any idea?
I don't know. I've never seen the photograph.
It would be nice to know, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Because you know what these photographers are like. They're not going to take one, are they? They'll take 6 or 7. So there must be one afterwards.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to know.
He probably took it out, I guess.
I would guess he would. Yeah.
Otherwise, he might have had a little bit of stick from Mr. Sergeant Major.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, one of the really big events of the Summer of Love was the release of the Beatles' Sgt Pepper. It was the album that got me back into the Beatles, because I felt the Beatles were a little bit poppy by the time we got to Can't Buy Me Love. At that time, it was always very much the first question was, are you a Stones or a Beatles fan? And I was always more down the Stones route.
I actually liked them both.
Yeah.
Always did.
I never really got back into them until Pepper. It was a guy, again, to do with the band. He was a friend of one of the guys, and he said, look, I've just got this new album, you must hear it. Oh, yeah, okay. So we all went round and listened to it. Wow, this is amazing. I mean, even now, it's still voted regularly as the best album of all time.
I think one of the most amazing things is the fact that it was created at a time when you had to laboriously go through things. You know, if you wanted a 20-track sound, you've got to make 20 tracks. You can't just press a button like you can nowadays.
No, I mean, it was recorded on 2 4-track machines.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it is unbelievable to think that now. You're right. I mean, now you've got gazillion track recording machines. Yeah. But it was interesting on a number of levels. I mean, first of all, it should have had Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane on. But the record company were desperate for a single. And Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane had been recorded for the album, but they decided to put them out on a single. And at that time, again, George Martin, the record company, decided they wouldn't put singles onto the album, so it never made its way onto the album. But the really sad thing about that is it regularly considered to be one of the strongest songs they recorded and would have been one of the album's really strong, or both would have been very strong songs on the album. But it was the first Beatles single to miss the number 1 spot. They'd had 11 consecutive number 1s to that point, and that only managed to reach number 2. Kept off the top spot by Engelbert Humperdinck's Release Me. And so it shows how diverse the charts were at that particular time. They would have had 18 consecutive number 1s if that had gone to number 1, because the next 4 or 5 were number 1s again.
Amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And when you think, and of course they released it as a double A side, so again the sales were split across the 2. So that's one of the sort of sad things. But I mean, the cover itself is a work of art, to say the least.
But I saw not long ago you put something up on Facebook about a Swedish.
That's right.
EP. Was it an EP or an actual album?
It was a Swedish group called Merk Blecket. And in 1964, the Beatles were over in Sweden, and one of the guys from this Merk Blecket actually met Paul McCartney, and he gave him a copy of their EP. And yeah, absolutely, it's on the website if anybody wants to have a look. Well, it's on Facebook and Twitter, but it will be on the website
on your Facebook and Twitter.
On my Facebook and Twitter, yeah. And what it is, it's a picture of the brass band, and it is, I won't go as far as say identical, but the positioning and everything, if you squint your eyes and move between the 2 albums, the similarity is quite spooky. Paul McCartney's never actually confirmed or denied. He's never commented as to whether it was an influence, but it was very much Paul McCartney's inspiration, Pepper. I mean, he had he's been on holiday, and he travelled around a little bit incognito, and he thought, well, wouldn't it be great if the band actually recorded something as another band, so it's not really the Beatles. And the Sgt Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, why the name? Well, partly why the name was because at that time, Big Brother and the Holding Company, group names were all long and fairly bizarre, and there are various points about where Sgt Pepper came. Some consider it was a derivation of sort of salt and pepper, Sgt Pepper, but the length of the band name there very much was to fit in with the local times, and it also was a time of the Paul is dead urban myth, and there are a lot of clues. If you're a conspiracy theorist, Sgt Pepper is one of your better albums to get into. One, not least of which, was if you look at the back cover, Paul McCartney is the only one standing with his back to the camera, and the lyrics. And again, it's the first time lyrics were ever printed on an album cover, but his head is in line with the George Harrison track. Within You, Without You. So that was taken as a very definite sign. Also, the way the Beatles seem to be holding Paul up is another one of the clues, and the waxwork Beatles seem to be looking down as if they're at a burial.
Could you confirm, is he alive or dead?
Well, the rumour has it that the jury's out, but a lot of people believe that he never did pass away. Of course, this is all reinforced again with Abbey Road, 28 If, and the 4 of them crossing the road as a grave digger and all the rest of it. But I mean, he wears a badge, not DOA. I can't remember now exactly, but it's the words dead, dead on arrival.
Yeah.
But apparently that comes. The other explanation for that badge is that when they were in Canada, one of the places they played, that was one of the police badges. And one of the guys gave him one of them, so he wore that. If
only I had Paul's number, I could just phone him up and just say, "Are you alive? Are you dead?" I wonder what he'd say. Of course, they did. I mean, I've actually seen all this. Well, I call it nonsense, but there again, I call most things nonsense. Where they've kind of taken Paul's face from, say, 1964, and then taken Paul's face from sort of 1975 or 1985 or something, and saying, look how it differs. Well, of course it does. There's 20 years in between. Yeah, of course, everybody... I don't look like I did when I was 12. I mean, not much difference, I'll grant you, but, I don't look much different. I mean, sorry, I do look a bit different, I don't look the same, and, but, I mean, why do people go down these roads of nonsense?
I don't know, but, I mean, they have...
or do you think it's something the Beatles themselves started to help promote...
It could well have been, but it got to the stage where, I forget the date of it, but the Beatles Monthly magazine actually ran an article denying the fact that Paul was dead. They felt that they actually had to put an article out, because the idea was that he died in a car crash in the November. That was seemed to be the where it all came from. But I mean, the songs themselves have got some interesting stories as well. You've got For the Benefit of Mr. Kite. And that was the lyrics mostly come from a poster that John Lennon found in a sort of junk shop when they were filming one of the videos. And the getting better phrase seems to be attributed to Jimmy Nicol, who stood in on their world tour for Ringo. Ringo had tonsillitis. And apparently when they asked him, how's it going, he'd say, it's getting better. It's getting better. But there's a couple of drug or sort of assumed drug references as well. The LSD one was actually Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. But that popular myth was fairly quickly put to one side when John Lennon pointed out that actually comes from his son Julian Lennon's friend, Lucy O'Donnell. And Julian had painted a photograph of her and called it Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I mean, it does seem quite a sensational name for a 4-year-old to come up with, but that is very much seen to be the explanation for that.
Yeah.
And also, again, the benefit of Mr. Kite. Henry the Horse is sometimes seen as a sort of euphemism for heroin.
But because it begins with the same letter?
Well, I guess so. But one of the things that's pointed out there is the horse on the poster is actually called Xanthus. But the explanation there is that George Martin's middle name was Henry, and because of George Harrison, George Martin, they sometimes refer to George Martin as Henry, and that was a tip of the cap to George Martin, who had a phenomenal input into the special effects and the shenanigans going on.
I wonder what the Beatles would have sounded like had they had, just an okay producer opposed to George Martin. I mean, obviously the melodies would still be there, but the overall, obviously, the sound of the production, particularly obviously on that Sgt Pepper, you'd just be looking at something completely different, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. I personally think that he was a very, very major influence on that. Yeah. Well, what's interesting, you look at photographs of them, and by this time particularly, I mean, they are there with the long hair and all the stuff, and he's there in his white shirt and dark blue suit. It looks as if he's just come from a meeting at IBM. And he before he was recording the Beatles, he was recording jazz artists and comedy artists, Spike Milligan, and the like. But I thought that... do you have a favourite track on
Sgt Pepper? Probably what's her name? She's Leaving Home. Is that on there?
She's Leaving Home.
I do love that.
Yeah.
I do love that. Yeah.
That was from an article in the paper. That's got an interesting story, that one as well. lady called Melanie Coe ran away from home, and Paul was reading, I think that one was in the Daily Mirror, and he wrote that. And he discovered some years later that was about Melanie Coe, and that he'd actually presented her with a dance award, or a miming award, I forget which now, when she was at Ready Steady Go. They were playing on one of the Ready Steady Goes. They had one of their regular competitions. She won, and Paul presented her with the prize.
Good grief.
It's absolutely amazing how these little sort of stories go on. And the other one I was like is Ringo Starr, because Little Help from My Friends was very much written for Ringo. And the original line had, if I sang out of tune, would you throw rotten tomatoes at me? Now, the Beatles in their early days, somebody had said they liked jelly beans, and for some while the fans all hurled jelly beans at them on the stage. And Ringo thought, well, I am not going to, for the rest of my drumming career, sing this song and have people hurl tomatoes at me, so he insisted they change it. And of course they did. And
of course, I know the story about the last note on that, and he wasn't going to do it at first, was he? The last note when he goes right up, because he's not a singer. Let's face it, he's not a singer, and he really had to be persuaded to do it, didn't he? And he did it.
He did it, yeah. Yeah, apparently it was late into the night. He was all for going off home about 4 o'clock in the morning or something, and they said, "No, we'll record this now." Yeah, but he did. You're right.
I don't know if he's. I don't know if he could do it live.
Well, no.
Who knows?
But there you go. How many could?
I think. Should we hear some Beatles?
Yeah, I think so. Day in the Life.
Day in the Life. The Beatles, of course, and Day in the Life. And I think that last chord goes on for about 3.5 hours, doesn't it?
It certainly does. You have to bring a packed lunch and a flask of coffee, I think, to hear the whole thing through.
It's wonderful.
But I mean, it took so long to record. It was unusual for the time. It cost a small fortune to record. But it's interesting at so many levels, because it was the last time the Beatles ever worked as a team together. I mean, the next album, the White Album, was when they really started to fall apart, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, each of the guys walked out of those points at some time. You mentioned All You Need Is Love. And that was actually written for the first ever live global TV broadcast called Our World. And it went out on the 25th of June. And that went out to an estimated 400 million people.
Which is not bad for, what year was that? 67?
67, yeah, satellite link.
400
satellites
million.
Were just really getting into...
400 million.
Because we hadn't landed on the moon by then, of course. That was still a couple
so that would have probably been most of Europe, most of the Americas.
Yeah. That was all over South America.
Yeah, that probably would have been about 400 million, wouldn't it?
I mean, the estimates vary around that sort of number. But it was an interesting time. It was when the Rolling Stones famously had a drug bust, and the Who, in sympathy with the boys, recorded the Last Time and Under My Thumb, but without John Entwistle, because I think he was away on honeymoon at the time. And they, of course, then released We Love You, that starts off with the cell door slamming, and that was the last single that was ever produced for them by Andrew Loog Oldham, their second and most successful, the guy that really took them into fame and fortune. But there were some interesting things happening as well, and to the side. Radio 1 made its first broadcast. For the previous 3 or 4 years, pirate radios had changed the face of listening, because at the time the Home Service offered a couple of half-hour slots with some pop music, and Radio 1 came along, and for the first time there was legal pop music available all day.
I remember the day very well. Got up, because I say I was only 8 at the time, but got up ready, going for school, obviously, and I've got a slightly elder sister. She's about 4 years older than me, and I didn't actually hear the opening track, which was Flowers in the Rain, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I didn't actually hear that, but I probably heard it from about, 7:30 onwards or something, and I remember us both looking at each other going, it's not very good, is it? Because obviously we've been so used to listening to what would have been the light programme, Radio Luxembourg, that kind of thing, but...
there was Radio Caroline.
Obviously the other one, yeah. Whatever we could pick up.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting time. The original version of Hair, the musical, opened off-Broadway on the 17th of October. And when that arrived, actually, in 1968 in the UK, it changed the law. That was the first time that censorship in the theatre had been abolished, basically. So that was the first full frontal nude performance on the London stage. And the Sexual Offences Act gained royal assent, and homosexuality was decriminalised. I mean, now you'd think that would have been done 400 years ago. With 1967, it was still illegal. Absolutely amazing how the times have changed. The Times actually ran an ad calling for the legalisation of marijuana. So the local Lib Dem party looking to do the same thing. This path has been trodden before. David Allen left Soft Machine. He was the guy that put Soft Machine together. But he was actually Australian. And they went and played in Paris. And when he tried to get back into the country, his visa had run out. So he went off and formed Gong. But one of the real magic things then was a festival. There was the Monterey Festival. Jimi Hendrix didn't want to follow the Who didn't want to follow Jimi Hendrix. Toss of a coin put the Who on first. Jimi Hendrix, as a result of being there, was invited to join the Monkees tour. And another urban myth is that it was the Daughters of the American Revolution that petitioned the organisers to pull them off, but it wasn't. It was a lady called Lillian Roxon who made that whole thing up. She was an Australian journalist touring with the group, and there was just so many great people. Janis Joplin got the big break there as well, and Otis Redding was playing that. And I think one of the great songs, and one of the songs that he opened his set with, was "Shake." It's actually a Sam Cooke song originally. And he decided that he'd cover it, and it's an absolutely superb version of it.
It certainly is. Derek, absolutely fantastic what we've done today, as usual. You're coming back again at 10 o'clock tonight, aren't you?
That's right,
and we're going to do an hour of what happened around this time of year over the years.
Exactly.
But for an hour or so, Derek, thanks very much, and we'll see you after the 10 o'clock news.